Most Americans today have no idea what they lost when Sunday died. But if you lived through the 1970s, you remember when one day actually meant something different. Sunday mornings in the 1970s started without an alarm clock. Your body just knew. Even kids felt it. Something softer in the air, quieter outside their bedroom windows. The whole neighborhood seemed to exhale together. Coffee came from aluminum percolators that made that distinctive bubbling sound every American family recognized. None of this instant stuff or fancy machines. The thick Sunday newspaper landed on porches with a satisfying thud, packed with sections nobody had time to read during the week. Dad would claim the sports section first, naturally. Mom got the lifestyle pages. But the real treasure? The comics. Families actually fought over who got to read them first. Church bells rang across every town and city, creating layers of sound that mixed with radio shows drifting from kitchen windows. AM radio ruled Sunday mornings, religious programs, easy listening music, and local talk shows that moved at the same unhurried pace as everything else that day. No rush, no panic, no frantic energy. Here's what made Sunday truly different. Blue laws kept almost everything closed. Grocery stores, department stores, car dealerships, all shuttered tight. You couldn't run errands even if you wanted to. This wasn't an inconvenience back then. It was freedom disguised as restriction. Kids woke up early anyway because Saturday morning cartoons spilled over into Sunday. Schoolhouse Rock, Bugs Bunny, and those classic Warner Brothers shorts that somehow never got old. Parents let them watch longer on Sundays while they savored their coffee and actually read newspaper articles instead of just scanning headlines. The house moved slower. Conversations lasted longer. Nobody checked their watch every 5 minutes because there wasn't anywhere urgent to be. Well, except church for most families, but even that felt unhurried. Getting ready meant taking time to look nice, not rushing around looking for clean clothes. Sunday morning had this magical quality where time stretched like warm taffy. Breakfast could last an hour. The newspaper could be spread across the entire kitchen table without anyone complaining about needing the space. Phone calls to relatives happened at a leisurely pace, with actual conversations instead of quick check-ins, but the peaceful morning was just the beginning. Because once families started getting dressed for church, and trust me, that was a production all by itself, Sunday really kicked into high gear. The social rituals that held entire communities together were just getting started, and every family had their own elaborate dance to perform. Church attendance wasn't just high in the 70s, it was absolutely massive. Over 60% of Americans showed up to services every single week. That's roughly 140 million people filling pews across the country. Compare that to today's 35%, and you start to understand how different Sunday mornings really were. Getting ready for church was its own elaborate ritual. Saturday nights meant setting out your Sunday best, the good clothes that stayed in closets all week. Kids got scrubbed clean in bathtubs while mothers pressed dresses and fathers shined leather shoes until they gleamed. Sunday wasn't casual Friday, it was formal Sunday, and everyone knew the difference. Walking into church meant entering a social universe that extended far beyond prayer and hymns. Sunday school classes buzzed with neighborhood gossip disguised as spiritual discussion. Children fidgeted through lessons about Moses while their parents exchanged knowing glances about whose teenage son got caught sneaking out last weekend. The church basement smelled like coffee percolating and mimeograph ink from freshly copied bulletins. But here's where Sunday church really mattered: the handshake line after service. Remember that tradition? Everyone filed past the pastor, shaking hands, exchanging pleasantries, and catching up on weekly neighborhood news. Mrs. Henderson would mention her arthritis. Mr. Thompson would complain about his lawnmower. The Johnsons would announce their daughter's engagement. Real information flowed through those handshake lines. Then came the parking lot social hour. Cars stayed put while families clustered around, talking about everything except religion. Work problems, vacation plans, whose tomatoes were coming in early this year. The church parking lot functioned like a weekly town hall meeting wrapped in Sunday politeness. Different denominations created their own neighborhood rhythms, too. Catholic masses ran like clockwork with predictable timing. Baptist services could stretch past noon if the preacher got inspired. Methodist churches attracted the business families. Lutheran congregations brought the most impressive potluck casseroles. Church announcements carried serious social weight back then. Potluck dinners, youth group fundraisers, visiting missionaries showing slide presentations from exotic locations. These weren't just religious events, they were community entertainment in towns where options stayed limited. The weekly routine created genuine connections between neighbors who might otherwise only wave from driveways. Kids who attended Sunday school together often became lifelong friends. Parents coordinated carpools, shared babysitting duties, and organized summer vacation Bible schools that doubled as free childcare. But here's what made Sunday church attendance so different from today. It wasn't optional. Social pressure, family expectations, and community standards made skipping church feel almost rebellious, which brings us to what happened after all. That spiritual socializing ended, and families headed home for the real centerpiece of their Sunday. The smell hit you first. Bacon crackling in cast iron skillets while coffee percolated in those heavy aluminum pots that made actual coffee, not today's watery excuse for caffeine. Sunday breakfast wasn't just a meal. It was a production that started early and involved the whole family. Mom would be up by 7, maybe earlier, already working on what she called the real breakfast. None of the cereal and toast business that happened during the week. We're talking stacks of pancakes made from scratch, eggs fried in real butter, and bacon that actually sizzled instead of microwaved into submission. The kitchen became command central, with kids wandering in still wearing pajamas, hoping to snag a piece of crispy bacon before getting shooed away. But here's where Sunday mornings got really serious. While breakfast was wrapping up, the dinner marathon was already beginning. Yeah, you heard that right. Dinner prep started before most people finished their eggs. Grandma and Mom would huddle over recipe cards, planning the Sunday feast like military strategists preparing for battle. The Sunday roast went into the oven by 10 in the morning. Sometimes it was beef, sometimes chicken, but it was always something that took hours of slow cooking. The whole house would fill with those rich, savory smells that made your stomach growl even when you were still full from breakfast. Potatoes got peeled by whoever was unlucky enough to get caught standing around the kitchen. Green beans needed snapping. Pie crusts required rolling. Then there was the good china situation. Every Sunday, without fail, the dining room table got set with the fancy plates that lived in the hutch the other 6 days of the week. Kids learned early not to mess around with Mom's good dishes. Those things cost money and weren't getting replaced anytime soon. The weird part is how much work went into meals that disappeared in 20 minutes, but nobody complained about the effort because takeout wasn't really an option. Pizza delivery? That was still years away for most neighborhoods. Chinese food came from restaurants you drove to, not from apps on phones that didn't exist yet. Every ingredient got prepared by hand in someone's kitchen. Every sauce came from a recipe passed down from somebody's mother or grandmother. The Sunday dinner table represented hours of chopping, stirring, seasoning, and timing that would make today's home cooks panic. All this kitchen activity created something special, though. Anticipation that built all day long. By the time those dinner bells rang, everyone was ready to gather around tables where conversation flowed as freely as the gravy, setting the stage for afternoon adventures that awaited. Freedom meant something completely different when your biggest worry was getting grass stains on your Sunday pants. Kids in the 70s owned the neighborhood every Sunday afternoon like tiny monarchs ruling empty kingdoms. No hovering parents, no scheduled activities, just pure, unsupervised adventure waiting outside every front door. The streets belonged to children once church let out and dinner prep began. Cars barely moved through residential areas because nobody had anywhere urgent to go. Blue laws kept shopping centers locked tight, so adults stayed home while kids claimed sidewalks, vacant lots, and every climbable tree within a 5-block radius. Well, except for that one oak tree Mrs. Henderson declared off limits after Tommy broke her fence. Be home when the streetlights come on served as the only real rule governing childhood expeditions. Parents trusted neighborhoods the way people trust gravity, completely and without question. Kids roamed in packs, inventing elaborate games that lasted hours. Stickball tournaments erupted in dead-end streets. Hopscotch courts appeared on every decent patch of sidewalk chalk could reach. But why did parents feel so comfortable letting children disappear for entire afternoons? Simple math, really. Every house had eyes watching from kitchen windows and front porches. Mrs. Johnson knew every kid on the block. Mr. Peterson could spot trouble brewing from his garage workshop. The neighborhood operated like an extended family where everyone's business stayed pleasantly intertwined. Kids developed remarkable creativity when boredom struck and screens couldn't save them. Empty cardboard boxes became rocket ships. Garden hoses transformed into water park attractions. Bicycles carried adventurers to distant kingdoms, also known as the elementary school playground 3 blocks away. Makes sense, right? Then there were the impromptu friendships that bloomed when someone knocked on your door asking if you could come outside. No texting, no advanced planning, just direct human contact that either worked or didn't. Rejection stung briefly, but acceptance meant instant companionship for whatever crazy schemes someone had cooked up. The weird part is how much territory kids covered without anyone panicking. Fishing expeditions to nearby creeks, treasure hunts through construction sites, epic bike rides that felt like cross-country adventures, but probably covered 2 miles total. Freedom expanded to fill whatever boundaries parents set, and those boundaries stretched pretty wide back then. Sunday afternoons created temporary childhood republics where imagination ruled and adult supervision stayed mercifully distant. But all that outdoor adventuring worked up serious appetites, and nothing called kids home faster than the promise of mom's legendary Sunday dinner spreading across the good china in the dining room. After everyone finished their second helping of Sunday dinner and loosened their belts, the real magic began. Company was coming. But here's the thing that would blow modern minds completely. Nobody called ahead. Nobody texted. Nobody checked if it was convenient. People just showed up. Your aunt might appear at 2 in the afternoon with a covered dish and stay until 8. The neighbors could knock on the door around 4 with their kids in tow, expecting coffee and conversation. This wasn't rude or intrusive. This was Sunday. Living rooms became revolving doors of relatives, friends, and neighbors who treated your house like their second home, and somehow, miraculously, there was always enough coffee in the pot and room at the kitchen table. Moms had the supernatural ability to stretch leftovers into full meals for unexpected guests. The conversations moved at honey-slow pace. Adults would settle into their spots. Dad in his recliner, the women around the kitchen table, kids sprawled on the living room floor playing board games or building elaborate Lincoln log cities. Nobody watched the clock. Time didn't matter on Sunday afternoons. Coffee cups got refilled endlessly while the grown-ups caught up on neighborhood gossip, shared family news, and told the same stories they'd been telling for decades. Uncle Bob would launch into his war stories. Aunt Martha would update everyone on her garden. The neighbors would discuss whose turn it was to organize the next block party. Meanwhile, kids from different families would band together like tiny tribes, disappearing into backyards to create their own entertainment. They'd build forts, play elaborate games of hide and seek that spanned multiple yards, or just sit on porch steps sharing secrets and planning adventures for the coming week. The beauty was in the randomness. You never knew who might drop by or how long they'd stay. Sometimes 3 different families would converge at once, turning your living room into an impromptu party. Other Sundays might bring quiet visits with just one neighbor stopping by to chat over pie and coffee. Then there was the ice cream truck. Its tinkling melody would send kids scrambling for loose change while adults dug into purses and pockets. Even the ice cream man knew Sunday was different. He'd linger longer, chat with the parents, and sometimes throw in extra treats for the little ones. These unplanned gatherings created the fabric of community life. Friendships deepened over kitchen table conversations. Kids learned social skills by watching adults navigate real face-to-face interactions. Problems got solved, celebrations got planned, and everyone stayed connected to their neighbors' lives. But what happened when the sun started setting and Monday morning began lurking around the corner? Blue laws weren't just suggestions back then. They were the real deal. Most states had actual legislation that forced nearly every business to shut down on Sundays. We're talking about a time when you couldn't buy a screwdriver, a pair of socks, or even a loaf of bread in most places. The only things open? Maybe a gas station if you were lucky, and perhaps one pharmacy for genuine emergencies. This wasn't some minor inconvenience either. Families had to plan their entire week around Sunday's shutdown. Run out of milk on Saturday night? Well, you better hope the neighbors had some to spare because the grocery store wasn't opening until Monday morning. Forgot to pick up that birthday gift? Tough luck. The department stores were locked up tight. But here's what happened when everything closed down. People actually rested. Not by choice necessarily, but because they literally had no other option. You couldn't run errands, couldn't go shopping, couldn't even think about tackling that home improvement project because the hardware store was dark. Sunday became this forced pause button on American life. The whole mentality was different too. Saturday meant getting everything done. All your shopping, all your preparations, all your running around. People would make lists, stock up on groceries, and handle every single thing they might need for the next 2 days. Saturday wasn't just another day, it was preparation day. Then there's the newspaper situation. Sunday papers were thick as phone books, packed with sections you'd never see during the week. People would actually fight over who got which section first. The sports pages for dad, the comics for the kids, the society section for mom. It was like Christmas morning every Sunday. What's wild is how this forced slowdown actually worked as therapy before anyone knew what therapy was. No rushing around town, checking off a to-do list. No quick trips to grab something you forgot. Just you, your family, and whatever entertainment you could create at home. Board games got pulled out. Conversation actually happened. Kids learned to be bored and figure out what to do about it. The anticipation factor was huge too. When stores reopened Monday morning, people were genuinely excited to get back to their routines. Shopping felt like an event again instead of just another chore you could knock out any old time. These restrictions created something nobody planned for, a genuine weekly rhythm that forced families to actually spend time together. And speaking of family time, nothing brought everyone together quite like the centerpiece of every Sunday. That magnificent feast that took hours to prepare and brought multiple generations around the same table. The TV schedule on Sunday afternoon was basically 3 channels, and whatever was on, you watched. No remote control battles, no endless scrolling through options. CBS had sports, NBC might have an old movie, and ABC usually served up something the whole family could tolerate together. Sunday afternoon television meant gathering around that massive console TV in the living room. Dad claimed his spot in the recliner, Mom settled onto the couch with her knitting, and kids sprawled across the carpet. The wonderful world of Disney started at 7, but before that, you were watching whatever sporting event dominated the afternoon airwaves. Football season brought the house together like nothing else could. The smell of coffee mixed with the distant aroma of dinner still cooking in the kitchen. Dad would fold his newspaper across his chest and inevitably drift off during halftime, snoring softly while the game continued without him. Nobody dared change the channel. Then there was the sacred Sunday nap phenomenon that seemed to strike every father in America simultaneously around 2:30. Makes sense, right? Big breakfast, church service, maybe some yard work, and suddenly that recliner became irresistible. The Sunday paper draped perfectly over his face like a tent, blocking out the world for exactly 45 minutes. But the real centerpiece of Sunday afternoon was dinner preparation reaching its crescendo. While everyone else relaxed in front of the TV, Mom orchestrated the final act of her culinary marathon. The roast had been cooking since noon. Mashed potatoes required perfect timing. Green beans couldn't be overcooked. Everything had to hit the table simultaneously and steaming hot. The dining room table got set with the good china that spent the other 6 days of the week safely tucked away in the cabinet. Real cloth napkins appeared. The everyday kitchen table was abandoned in favor of the formal dining room where conversations happened differently. Slower, more intentional. Dinner itself was an event that lasted well over an hour. No TV allowed, no rushing through courses. Kids shared stories from their afternoon adventures. Parents caught up on neighborhood gossip. Grandparents, if they were visiting, told the same stories everyone had heard dozens of times before. And somehow, nobody minded. The weird part is how naturally this rhythm worked. Nobody scheduled it or planned these elaborate Sunday rituals. They just happened because Sunday demanded a different pace entirely. Well, as the afternoon stretched toward evening and dirty dishes piled up in the kitchen, Sunday's magic wasn't quite finished. The day still had one more act to perform before Monday morning came knocking. Sunday night meant one thing was certain. Monday morning was coming, whether you liked it or not. The weekend was winding down, and families across America began their gentle ritual of preparing for the week ahead. Bath time became serious business on Sunday evenings. Not just a quick rinse, but a proper scrubbing that would carry you through at least the first few days of school or work. Parents transformed into efficiency experts every Sunday night. Moms fired up the ironing board, pressing school clothes and work shirts with military precision. The iron hissed and steamed while she worked through piles of fabric, creating crisp lines that would make Monday mornings smoother. Meanwhile, Dads gathered up the family shoes, spreading newspaper on the kitchen table before applying polish with methodical strokes. Shiny shoes meant respect, and respect mattered in 1970s America. Kids faced their own Sunday night responsibilities. Homework that had been ignored all weekend suddenly became urgent. Math problems and book reports competed for attention with the last precious hours of freedom. Well, the smart kids anyway. The rest would panic Monday morning at their lockers, but the evening wasn't all work and preparation. Sunday night television offered families their final chance to gather around the living room for shared entertainment. The wonderful world of Disney drew millions of viewers to their couches, creating a nationwide tradition that lasted decades. Families watched together, no channel surfing or individual screens dividing their attention. You watched what was on, and you watched it together. The telephone played its part too. Sunday evening brought long-distance calls to grandparents, aunts, and uncles scattered across the country. These weren't quick check-ins, but proper conversations that stretched for 30 minutes or more. Kids took turns updating relatives about school, friends, and weekend adventures, while adults caught up on family news and neighborhood gossip. Let's not forget the subtle melancholy that crept in as Sunday night deepened. The house grew quieter as evening shadows lengthened. Parents double-checked that lunch money was ready and permission slips were signed. Kids reluctantly gathered their school supplies and mentally prepared for another week of teachers, tests, and early alarm clocks. As bedtime approached, the Sunday rhythm finally slowed to its gentlest pace. Stories were read, prayers were said, and bedroom doors closed on another weekend well spent. The house settled into peaceful quiet, holding on to Sunday's last moments before Monday's inevitable arrival. Sunday nights in the 70s weren't just endings. They were bridges between one week and the next, reminding families that even the most leisurely day eventually gives way to responsibility and routine.